I want to preface this by saying that this is going to be a very interactive webinar and community of practice. So we've unmuted everyone's speakers. So if you're not speaking, please just mute yourself so that we don't hear background noise and any feedback. And if you are listening to this on your computer, please don't have your phone active. And if you're listening to this on your phone, don't listen to it through your computer as well, because it will create crazy feedback. And don't put us on hold just because there's music usually, and that creates a tremendous amount of distraction. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Andrea Messing-Massey. I am the Deputy Director of Education Systems Center at Northern Illinois University, and we have been working with DCEO and other groups from around the state, helping to pull together thinking and coordination around youth career pathways and youth apprenticeships. Particularly working with Young Invincibles, which I know that you folks have had a lot of connection with already. Our office worked directly with folks through DCEO and the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board to pull together the Youth Career Pathways Grant and work with folks on the Youth Apprenticeship Grant, which is where this community of practice built out of. We have had experiences in the past where we've noticed that having a space for peer-to-peer networking and peer-to-peer discussion offers a really great avenue for learning for us at the state level, but then also a great avenue for learning for you folks as well. So again, this is going to be a really interactive space, and hopefully these monthly calls will be a space where you learn something new from a practitioner in the field or a national expert or a state level expert, but also a place where you learn from each other. So with that said, I would like to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves so that we get a chance to know who's here and what a little bit about your program. So if we could just do a very quick whip around, and we'll start with our presenter, Kim Kuchenbrod from Vermilion Advantage. Just a very quick whip around your name, your organization, and a little bit, just a little tiny bit of background. For Kim, a little bit of background about Vermilion Advantage, but then for the rest of everyone, just a little bit of background about your organization and or your project. Kim, do you want to go ahead and get us kicked off?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Kuchenbrod. I'm a workforce development professional working with Vermilion Advantage, which is a hybrid chamber economic development group. And for the past 20-some years, we have been developing a talent pipeline management system around 4, and now we just added our 5th collaborative group, and we've been now working with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to develop a blueprint for others to follow.
Great. Thank you. I'm just going to run down the line of the participants going in alphabetical order. Amanda Rothenberger, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Amanda Rothenberger. I'm with Business and Career Services in Arlington Heights, and we are doing a youth program with our manufacturing. So we are putting kids in an internship through a boot camp, and they're getting some extra certifications in the manufacturing and then getting some experience. So that's kind of a quick preview of the program.
Great, thank you. Sorry, Priyanka? Is Priyanka with us?
I think she may be listening through the computer speakers and typing in the chat.
All right. Let's see here. I'm trying to look at the chat box. Okay. Is it possible for folks that are listening on the computer to introduce themselves? This is going to be really interactive, so there is going to be a need to actually be able to speak up a little bit. Why don't we,
for them to call in then?
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we go ahead? Is Courtney available to say hi and give us a little information? All right, why don't we just have someone, whoever is available, to say hello, and then we will we'll let folks connect. If anyone's available, I realize that folks are. This is very new for us, so I realize that folks are connecting via audio. So if anyone's on the phone that's willing to speak up and just give their information, that would be great.
Hi, this is Courtney Greiner. Let me just mute my computer so I don't hear myself. I am the director of the Medical Assisting Program at Methodist College, and we currently have a youth apprenticeship program, and the program is for 18 to 24-year-old, and we have 6 apprentices that have already started, and basically they're going through the nursing assistant program here, and they're in their 7th week, so they're starting their clinicals. And then once they finish that, they will take their CNA licensure exam and then start the medical assisting program. So it's kind of a different apprenticeship. It's a healthcare apprenticeship, but we're very excited about it.
That's great. That's helpful information.
Thank you.
How about anybody else?
This is Morgan Nelson. I'm representing for Mike Massey. He's actually out of office right now. I can't speak too much on his part, but he is part of the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board and chairs the Youth Committee.
Thanks, Morgan.
My name is Michael Kuhn. I work for Peoria Public Schools. I'm the CTE director, and we're working with students that are in the CNA and IT pathways, and we're working with them to try to get credentialed in both those fields.
Great, thank you. And that's an in-school youth program, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Anyone else that's on the phone and available to say hi?
I can say hi. Erin Steva with Young Invincibles. We are working with Ed Systems Center and Department of Commerce. We've done several years of research on best practices for building young adult-friendly apprenticeships, and excited to learn more today.
Thanks, Erin.
And this is Emily Ruska, also from Education Systems Center, working with Andrea to help support these efforts.
This is Stephanie Sema with Mantracom in Marion, Illinois, and we're working with 3 manufacturing companies, and our classes are set to start November 6th.
Great.
Hello.
Thanks for sharing. Hi.
Hello, this is Devin from YouthBuild Lake County.
Hi, Devin.
Hello. I just thought I would just chime in whenever I had a chance.
That's fine.
Yeah, we are actually going to get started the Career Access Program for DCEO in January, and we've already went underway with our recruitment.
Oh, that's great. Excellent. Anybody else?
Hi, this is Larice Allen from representing the Cabot Group, and we have an out-of-school youth grant with DCEO that just started in June, and it's for career pathways in the ways of culinary arts.
Oh, that's great.
Hi.
Thank you. Hello.
This is Jennifer Foyle. I'm with Northern Illinois University's Center for Governmental Studies. I have support DCEO in this project, and I'm working with Ed Systems and Young Invincibles to provide any kind of technical assistance as needed.
All right. I think we've gotten through pretty much everybody. So again, this is exciting. This is kind of a new model for some of the, and I hesitate to call it technical assistance, because what this really is, this community of practice, is a chance for you all as practitioners to come together and to learn from each other. And part of the effort behind this is to really make sure that we're connecting these career pathways and apprenticeship, youth apprenticeship programs to broader efforts around the state, and to make sure that we're all staying on the same page and that you all know and learn from each other within this kind of small pilot community. So having said that, I'd love to turn it over to Kim Kuchenbrod, who's going to talk about how Vermilion County has managed to get employers to the table and keep them at a table through a talent pipeline management strategy. So Kim, can I turn it over to you?
Absolutely. Thank you. Again, hello, everyone, and I'm happy to provide this information to you, hoping that will help all of you in your efforts in developing your own apprenticeship training programs. We started, like I said earlier, we started over 20 years ago in working with advanced manufacturing. Since then, we have grown from 12 companies participating in one collaborative to over 60 companies sitting at the table and being part of the solution, working with the educators, working with the CTE programs and the EFE systems, and as well as the 2- and 4-year colleges. Can we move the slide forward, please? We are all hearing across all of our headlines, this isn't a Vermilion County issue. This isn't an Illinois issue. In fact, on Monday, I was in Washington, D.C., at the U.S. Chambers National Conference, and Secretary of Labor Acosta was there, and he was even stating that at the G20 summit that this is a global issue, that there are many countries who are struggling to develop their own pipeline. And this is what brought our attention back 20 years ago, is we were having problems filling out just basic entry-level positions with the manufacturers. So we decided with Vermilion Advantage being a hybrid economic development, workforce development, and chamber, that we would step up to the plate and take the lead as a neutral convener to see what we could do to address this problem. Next slide, please. Some of you have been keeping an eye on the talent pipeline management, which actually started with the U.S. Chamber in 2014, and what they were doing through also working with Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity here in Illinois. It encouraged Vermilion Advantage to step forward and to share our model and how we've developed it over time. Since then, there has been a playbook that is available online at the U.S. Chamber that basically outlines the 6 strategies that we've been using over the years. First, when we started is, and I'm going to be throwing questions out to all of you to consider. When we started, through economic development, we would do local calls with businesses, and we would ask them, what are your job projection needs over the next, say, 24 months? What are the educational levels that you're requiring? What are the skill sets that you are looking for? And from that was starting to lay the base foundation on what we have now developed into a very strong K through 14 educational delivery programs. What we started also to look at was we were identifying common skill issues. Some of those skill issues were technical, some of them were soft skills, and of course the issue that everyone across the nation is dealing with, and that is the drug testing and those who were failing it. As I mentioned earlier, we started with 12 metals manufacturers to champion the cause, and we are now up to 60 businesses, and in January of this year, we started our 5th collaborative, and that was education. We discovered that we were having problems filling some of our positions within the education institutes, and this is everything from certified teachers down to bus drivers. So we're now tackling that. Again, 5 clusters moving forward. Next slide, please. The members of all of our clusters or collaboratives are anything from mom-and-pop operations with 1 to 2 employees to major international companies. Each one of these companies are members of our organization, but they also pay to play. And what they pay is an extra dollar amount beyond their membership fees, but it gives them a voice at the table, and they are helping implement programs such as the ThyssenKrupp apprenticeship training programs, the ones that are also at Danville Metal Stamping, Watchfire, and so forth. And our internship programs are now developed from, we recruit at the sophomore high school level they complete the programs as juniors and seniors, and then up into 2- and 4-year university programs. So we really have a very diverse group of companies supporting our efforts here. Next slide. Part of the TPM is finding someone in your community to be a convener. And there's a difference between being a convener for this cause and being a stakeholder. Individual organizations such as a chamber or an economic development group have the upper edge on this simply because we already have a confidentiality in place with many of these companies, and they are willing to come to the table to share information with like businesses and many of their competitors. They know that the information that they're sharing with us is going to remain confidential, and any data that we collect, we send it back out in an aggregate format. So really, we are playing the neutral role in this process. And the other benefit on this as well is we are exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. So anybody who wants our information in our databases that we collected, we do not have to share that information. The other piece is we're not going anywhere. Vermilion Advantage has been here for many, many years, and we have become the relationship builder between a lot of different entities within our community. And as you're building collaboratives, as you are building your relationships with your own companies and so forth, you have to keep in mind that you're going to be in this for the long haul. Some of you may have already discovered that the person that you are working with in your apprenticeship training programs, general managers come and go, CEOs come and go. And so it becomes a re-education process. So it's never ending. You're kind of constantly be re-educating people of why they're sitting at the table and why they are participating in any of your own programs, simply because you are trying to build a talent pipeline system to meet your own current needs. Next slide, please. These are some of the attributes of our model is, again, we have sitting at the table with us, and even though we are in East Central Illinois, and we are surrounded by many, many cornfields and soybean fields at this time, we are tearing down a lot of silos that have prevented us from succeeding in earlier years. So our collaboratives, when we are putting together our programs, anybody that's going to be impacted by it is sitting at the table. So not only are we working with the employers, we're working with the education institutes from K-12, trade programs, community colleges, and four-year universities. And then we have our wraparound social services. The social services are able to identify some of the barriers for those individuals who are participating in our program, and we're able to remove those barriers so that individual, whether it be a student or an adult, can move forward into sustainable career fields. And then our own local WIOA or WIA board has adjusted, and I myself sit on the executive committee. I have chaired the youth council, and we make sure that we're all heading in the same direction versus being siloed and each of us doing our own thing. Because when we do that as separate entities, sometimes we end up spinning our own wheels, and we're not moving forward. We're able to communicate the plan from the employers to everyone who's involved in workforce development, and that includes our guidance counselors, our workforce development professionals, our HR, our temp services, and so forth. And we do this by collecting data on an annual basis. So we're all sitting at the table together. We're all addressing these problems as a team, and we just have a simple set of rules. And the rules are everyone benefits or we don't move forward. Everyone contributes. All the programs, like I said, it has to benefit everyone across the board, and we evaluate everything. If we don't see the results, we dump it and we move on with that. And then Vermilion Advantage asks all the participants to make sure that when we are requesting the data, that they participate and return the surveys that we use to collect the data. Next slide, please. Okay, so when I was just talking about the convener, that's basically strategy one of the U.S. Chamber's talent pipeline management. The second strategy in that curriculum is looking at your demand planning process. Sometimes a program can fail because do you know how many people you're going to have available for those apprenticeship training programs? Do you know what the needs are? So every year, come January, Vermilion Advantage sends out to the employers a very simple survey. We ask the employers to look at, for all their job titles, so we have a list of all those job titles, what is your replacement need? What is your new need for that position within the next 24 months? We also ask them for that position, what level of education is acceptable, starting at the high school GED level, associates, bachelor's, higher up. We also ask them, are there any special credentials that you're looking for and that you will accept in that particular position? And then we look at very specific skill sets, and that's when we were able to identify additional training needs to add to the apprenticeship training programs, different training programs that can be offered through our adult and community ed through our local community college, or do we need to bring in an individual program provider because that need's not being met locally. Once we have that data, it's all aggregated into a format, and then it is put on our website. So if you would like to see a copy of it, you can go to vermilionadvantage.com. Under our community link, there is a database source, and you can pull out and look at our annual job projections. We sort that out by the highest demanding jobs. We look at it by career cluster, alphabetical, chronological. And you can see a copy of the report that lists out the education levels as well as the skill sets. We also ask of those companies how many of them are offering or considering offering apprenticeship or internship training programs for high school adults and college students. We also look at where are you finding your talent? What resources are you using? The reason why we ask that is because we're trying to identify untapped resources. For example, one that is slowly coming into not really the forefront, but others are starting to use this, is your churches are establishing job boards for their parishioners to look at. So some people are able to identify potential employees from that area. Vermilion Advantage just recently created a youth job board, very identical to Indeed.com and so forth. And what it is individual companies can post any jobs that are available for 16 to 24-year-olds, and our local Workforce Investment Board routes the students to that. Students can get that information and then go to that employer. We also list any internships, apprenticeship training programs, and any volunteer opportunities that could lead a youth to employment. So this is just one survey that we collect. The other one that we, as soon as we get done with the job projections, we go back to the HR and we do a wage and benefit. The wage and benefit tells us just about everything we need to know regarding that company and particular positions, so we can do the low, medium, and high range of a welder's position and what skill sets are in it. So when we are sharing that information with the apprentice, then they can say that, see that an entry-level position is this. But if I go and if I go through the apprenticeship training programs, if I get some basic credentials behind me, then I can go up to the medium level, or I can go up to the high level as well. So this, again, is a great tool for the guidance counselors. So next slide, please.
Can I just interrupt real quick? If there's someone on the phone, if you don't mind muting if you're not talking, just there's a lot of feedback and it sounds like there's some rustling around. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
I can't stress enough that when we are collecting our data, that the confidentiality from the individual companies remains confidential because as I mentioned earlier, we have competitors coming to the table to share their salary ranges, their benefit package, as well as what their supply and demand is going to be over that time frame. That data remains only with me and the CEO, and we are able to take that data later on if a company, for whatever reason, has done a warn and they're going to be laying off or closing their doors. We can then take the raw data that we've collected and we can go to another company and say, Company A has this type of talent. They are closing their doors on this. We have their job descriptions. Would you like to see these candidates? And possibly what we're doing is we're bypassing that individual from having to go and sign up for unemployment because they can transfer automatically over. And we've been very successful in that in a lot of the different clusters, and the business that's closing is more than willing to share that information at that time. So confidentiality is very important simply because once it's broke, it could be disastrous for any collaborative that's being organized or is currently in operation. We're able to identify the gaps. We can create the awareness in it. We can speak on behalf of the businesses and work directly with the community colleges in developing such programs that they need. Next slide, please. This is just a quick splattering of the programs that we've developed, and some of you may be looking at it going pre-K and birth to 5. Why are we doing workforce training at that level? We partnered with United Way on a birth to 6 cognitive development calendar. We have worked with several other professionals, healthcare professionals, and we want to help or assist individuals developing that cognitive development. So every newborn in Vermilion County receives this calendar. We run summer camps that are basically STEM-based programs. We run those with local, and we partner with local YMCAs or the Boys and Girls Clubs and the community college to keep the students very active. And what we're doing is when we look at the return on the investment, we know where we're just planting the seed with this. We've been involved with Project Lead the Way, a national program, since about 2000. And Project Lead the Way is a K through 5 program, science-based, learn through project-based activities with that and engagement with the students. We've been very successful in that particular program. For our middle and junior high, we started out with a small grant which actually came from a DCEO to help us with a career exploration lab. Several years ago, it started in the back of a semi-trailer that would travel from school to school, and we could put 6 students through it a day. Basically, and it was on the 4 highest demanding areas: healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, and then at that time, IT business services. We partnered, again, tearing down the silos here in Vermilion County with the community college, because what we've discovered in our evaluation process is that many students did not even know that a community college existed in our county. So it was a win-win for the college. We partnered with them. They provided the lab space. Now we have every 8th grader in the county, which averages about 1,000 to 1,200 students a year, come to the DACC campus. They get to see it, interact with individuals there, and we have a lab that is based on, I call it my romper room on steroids. They get to work with CNC machines, robotic arms, humanoid robotics, graphic designs, heat presses, electronic boards. They get to walk in the shoes of a CNA and a nurse specialist. They get to learn horticulture and agricultural through a landscaping program, and then we have a 4-stroke engine that the students build from from the block on up. They also, while they're on site, receive a career cruising introduction where the students are able to identify their career interest, and now our county high schools are using that particular program as a registration for incoming freshmen to select their courses. And then we add the third program is Choices, which is a life skills building program about picking your career choices, looking at where you want to go with your life, and the possibility, of what happens should you choose to drop out of school. So then on to our high school, and every one of these programs are linked in some fashion. So at our high school, again, the Career Lab is available for the high school students, especially at the sophomore level. We then have the Project Lead the Way program, where we're using this to introduce students into engineering career fields, but the skill sets that they pick up from that are transferable to so many different pathways beyond engineering. Through the Project Lead the Way, we offer summer internships to any student who chooses to explore those career fields with the members in our manufacturing environment. College Express is a program that we partner with through our local Education for Employment system. Many of these programs, the students are earning dual credit. They're having internships, leading towards paid internships. With that I think there's over 20 different categories. One we started, for example, was our Certified Production Technical Certificate program, where the students are going to come out with that credential when they graduate from high school. We've worked in the past with a Logistics Distribution and Warehouse Certificate. However, it's very difficult to make logistics exciting for students. So we've had some issues with enrollment. We're currently looking at a program through UPS University where they can develop an apprenticeship training program where the students can come out with that apprenticeship certificate. It's an earn to and learn program where the students participate at the college level, at the junior senior age, and then they work part-time with the local UPS. So we are going to try to expand that as well to other distribution organizations or companies within Vermilion County. One area that's very important in our community is OSHA training certification. We've been working with CareerSafe Online, which is an OSHA. They have several different programs that an organization can choose from. They have a 10-hour OSHA training, which is your basic. They have a 10-hour construction, cybersecurity, and they have recently developed a healthcare and an agricultural program, which also is supported by your local FFA organizations. This is an interactive online program. Students go through several modules. Once they're completed, then they do receive a 10-hour OSHA training card from OSHA, and that a student can actually graduate not only with their high school diploma, possibly a certificate of training from either the tech program or the warehouse program, plus their OSHA 10 certification. These are all extra points that the employers then look at, and these particular students go to the top of the hiring stack to be interviewed. Our Global Careers and Professions program is an internship program at our largest high school in the county, Danville District 118. Students take a semester-long program where they take a deep dive into what their career interests are. The whole objective of this particular program is to get the students to be focused prior to graduating from high school on what they want to do so that they know they're on the right pathway, that they're not going to be wasting scholarship money or student loan money, that they're going to be on the right track. In the past, we've had some students, we were looking at it, and they said, I went to a 4-year college, and now I've discovered that I want to be a dental hygienist, and I could have only gone into a 2-year program versus 4-year. So now they're looking at high student loan debt. They're also looking at, some students are just dropping out completely. I would like to share with you very quickly is I have a student that I worked with just a few weeks ago, and when I was telling him that he did not have to go to a four-year college to become a welder, he literally broke down crying in my office, and he said, "You have no idea the stress that you've just lifted from my shoulders," because he goes, "I did not want to go to college." I said, "But I can put you into an apprenticeship training program." And then I was able to show him the supply and demand from our job projections and the entry-level positions, and with it, so now we have him on that track. But he was getting ready, and he's an early graduate. He's graduating in December, and he had no idea what the next step was going to be. And now we've been able to turn him into the right direction. But the Global Careers and Professions programs allows the students to go out and job shadow in that career field. They look at what the education requirements are, what are the skill sets that they're looking for, and we give them the job readiness skills that they need so that they're ready to move forward. All of our cluster companies, hospitals, and so forth, all of our members have opened their doors very willingly to allow these students to go in. We've had students sit in on surgeries. We've had students learn how to fly planes. We've had students go in and take court cases. I can say that the sky's the limit, whatever career field that student's been wanting to explore, we've been able to provide them with that opportunity. And then we have the NIMS Apprenticeship Training Program. We partnered with two manufacturing companies here in town, the ThyssenKrupp Presta and ThyssenKrupp Crankshaft. This is a competitive apprenticeship program where students have to apply. They have a formal interview, and their parents also are interviewed so that they understand the commitment that their child is making should they be accepted. This year, both ThyssenKrupp companies just doubled their enrollment for this. ThyssenKrupp Crankshaft is using it to do a direct hire into these programs. These students start out around $9 to $10 an hour. They attend school part-time, and then 2.5 days a week for so many hours a day, they are on-site learning from a career mentor. All these students are put through every department at both companies, and then they can choose which best suits them. Some of these students who have successfully completed the program have been offered summer internships as they go into college, and now ThyssenKrupp is paying their college tuition and helping basically grow their own workforce locally. Some of our students in the NIMS Apprenticeship Training Program have been asked to sit on the State of Illinois Apprenticeship Committee as they start to move forward with this and designing more youth-based apprenticeships for the state of Illinois. Post-secondary, we offer internships. We offer what we call career scholarships initiatives. These are contractual scholarships where we will pay 1/3 of a student's college tuition in the 6 hardest career fields in Vermilion County. And in return, the student will come back during the summer. They get a paid internship, but the contractual piece is that they will come back and they must work in Vermilion County for 2 years. In all of our years that we've had that, we've only lost 2 students. One followed his wife to a job in the St. Louis area, and the other was a dynamic young lady who was a double major in computer science and electrical engineering. She was 100% deaf. So when her family moved to Florida, that was her support system, and she followed them. We have our Megatronics certification lab, and this weekend, again, to help plant the seed, we are having our 4th tour of industries where we have 8 companies who are opening their doors to allow the public to go behind the scenes to see the products that are manufactured here in Vermilion County. We always try to do this during Manufacturing Month. So students can go out, see it, touch it, feel it. Parents can help guide that. And then of the 8 companies who are opening their doors, 6 of them will be taking job applications at that same time. And then those who have the apprenticeship training programs will be promoting that and looking to recruit students for that. And then as I mentioned earlier, on VermilionAdvantage.com, we now have a youth job board. So those are all of our programs that we have, and I can share with you that we have a very small budget to run these programs. We use some grant support when needed, but the fee to sit at the table is an average of $1,500 per company. So we usually, some are a little less, some are a little more, but we basically keep our budget of $125,000, and we've been doing that for the last 20 years. Next slide, please. One of the next pieces of the talent pipeline is strategy 3, and that is looking at the competencies and credentials. So when we do our job projections, we are looking at this very carefully, and we just did a survey last year with our manufacturers, and they did not realize what we were asking them. Is it a required or preferred of the skill sets required for CNC machining? And what we discovered, what the employers were looking for, was the skill sets for 18 different job titles, but it all came back to having CNE credentials. So it was a NIMS beta test for us, and you can see from the pie chart there what we discovered from the companies and the skill levels. For example, Watchfire, they had 123 different things that they were looking for. At 46% of their staff would have been CNC operators. Next slide, please. One of the effective approaches to building employer collaboratives is number one, everyone needs to have a commitment and engagement at the top leadership. When we have them at the table, we ask for those who can make decisions. We do not want someone who's coming to the table as a listener only, because there's a lot of activity that goes on in these meetings, and once we come out, we have an action plan and we're ready to go. We all have shared priorities on what we're looking at, and we speak with a single voice to all of the providers and to the community that these are the needs of these employers. And all this is done through shared communication in various formats. But to plan all of this, we have 3 to 4 meetings a year. The rest is all done through online communications. We also look at that it's shared capacity building. For example, ThyssenKrupp Presta has made it very clear that if they have an intern that they have been training for several years, or for the last 2 years, but that is just not a good fit for that student, that's okay if that student decides that they want to work elsewhere. But no matter where that student goes, whatever company hires that individual, they're going to get a well-trained individual who's ready to hit the ground running. We share our best practices across the board. Nothing is in a secret vault saying we cannot share it with anyone. We also look at short-term and long-term objectives. And the biggest thing is, when anyone is looking at developing a collaborative, is you can only eat the elephant one bite at a time. We started out small, and it has taken us 20 years to develop up to 5 collaboratives with the 60 organizations. Next slide, please. So many people are saying, how do you fund this? Well, first of all, the big question is, what are you funding? Because sometimes everyone starts to look and say, okay, I need $100,000, I need $1 million, or I don't have this kind of money. You need to know what your plan is and what you're looking to fund first, and start small. We started out with forklift training, and from there we jumped down to a 3rd grade Mrs. Mary's Math and Science program that was developed. Sorry about that, I hear a phone going off here. We use that to develop it with our 3rd grade, and we use school teachers to help develop that curriculum. And then we started looking at our internal resources, how do we sustain it, and then we started building our roadmap. Some of our larger corporations who have foundations and They have been a great partner in that. For example, the Alcoa Foundation, which now has changed to the Arconic Foundation, for the last 5 years has provided us with extra grant money to take our GTT program global out into the school districts which could no longer afford that. So it really, don't let the funding scare anyone, whether you're developing an apprenticeship training program and so forth, because you have to look at what resources are available to you and how you can share those resources. Our career lab cost me around $13,000 a year to run that program. To start it, it was substantially more. But the lab space I don't have to pay for because that's part of the DACC. The staff to manage it is done through our EFE and retired volunteers. So everything is doable if you just look at all the resources and do not leave any stone unturned when you're putting these programs together. Next slide, please. Again, our structure is completely self-funded with a fee structure. All the staffing for these programs, which is basically myself, is absorbed through the Vermilion Advantage budget. Surveying and facilitation is done through Vermilion Advantage budget as an economic development function. We do not outsource that because we want to be that natural confidential convener. And again, we have those special grants. Occasionally, very it's rare that we will receive some kind of state funding or local funding or WIOA funding. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits? What are the values that that occurs when a community or an organization reaches out to organize an employer-led collaborative? Number one, your stronger brand recognition when you're recruiting, that you're saying you're doing it through the manufacturing cluster or the healthcare cluster. We have shared capacity building. There is clear communication around all the talent needs that's going on there, because right now in some of your communities, you may be company A is stealing from company B, who company C is robbing from company A. And so you have to look at, do you really have a flowing talent pipeline of what's coming in to your community, or are you just robbing from each other and continuing a vicious cycle? So when we're looking at things, when we, for example, I'll just use the University of Illinois. In their engineering program, how many engineers actually come to Vermilion County? We look at that 50% of the graduating engineering students are going to go back to their home country. And then you look at, you've got 50% of the pot left. Of those, how many are going back to their home state? How many of them are staying locally? So do you have a strong pipeline to feed into your engineering program needs, or through local apprenticeship training programs where the businesses are taking the responsibility of home growing their own individuals and then helping that student through scholarship opportunities? Where's the loyalty going to lie? Probably they're going to come back and they're going to work for that employer who helped pay for their educational training. And then we're also able to improve leverage when we're looking at grants and at resources, because if a company has a particular training and another company is wanting it too, we share the resources, we share the tools, which becomes less of a financial burden for individual companies. Next slide, please. So when you look at what is the value stream, this slide here states it all. You have two streams coming in. You have the supplier need and role, and you have the employer role, and they meet in the middle. So the supplier need is we are starting low with a career awareness at a very early age, and then we're building career exploration from the junior high on up. And once we get into that senior high school and the dual credit and our apprenticeship training programs, we're basically doing career prep. And we're looking at getting those students the competencies and the credentials and looking at the performance measures which are required by the employer. And then from that, the pre-employment training to an onboarding. and the onboarding becomes much easier for the employers because they've had a hand in, through the apprenticeship training programs, through providing resources at the Career Lab and everything, that they know these students are on the right pathway. So their onboarding process is a lot shorter, whereas if the individual did not go through this process, the onboarding process could be 6 months to a year before that individual is up to full productivity. And then you have the bigger question is, how do you retain the individuals? And that, again, comes into our wage and benefits, because now the employers can say, okay, now I'm looking at the full aggregate report. Am I remaining competitive with my competition, or where do I need to make that adjustment to it? And then now many of the seasoned employees are now becoming mentors and the trainers for that younger generation coming into the process. So I believe the next slide should end that, and so that is what Vermilion Advantage has been doing over the years to develop our own talent pipeline and to develop the collaboratives that we need, which has now included our apprenticeship training programs.
Thank you so much, Kim. This is, no matter how many times I see this presentation, I'm always a little gobsmacked as I sit here and look at all your programs. I want to go back to high school and engage in some of them. I see that Nick is typing and Sandra's typing, and I'm wondering if there's anyone on the phone that wants to speak up and ask some questions of Kim. So I'll go ahead and get started. I have a question. So one of the things that, as we contemplate building out career pathway systems at the local and regional level, one of the asks from employers is constantly, I need employees that know how to show up on time, know how to communicate, know how to communicate both orally and in written form, how to, don't fail a drug test, all those things. Some basic employability skills, then also some kind of higher level employability skills as well. How are you addressing employability skills? Is that a community level response, or is that something that's happening more at the kind of individual programmatic level?
That is a big issue that we continue to address. One of the things that we've been doing, for example, through the Global Careers and Professions program, we address all of those concerns. What does it mean to be career ready? And we talk about, sometimes I'll be honest with you, it has to be very direct and blunt conversations with the students. And one of the things that we've been presenting to them is, if you have a problem attending school on Monday and Friday, you're basically developing a habit of not coming to work on Monday and Friday. We also share that employers can ask for attendance records and figure that out prior to even interviewing you. We also address a lot of skill sets that employers have not recognized yet until after the fact that they've hired the individual, and that could be something as simple as cell phone usage in the workplace.
Yep.
Everyone sees those cell phones. Everyone has them in their hands. It seems to be an addiction of sorts. And so the employers have recognized this, and knowing with this new generation of employees coming in, this hasn't been a problem in the past. So we now have to make it very clear why you cannot be on your cell phone and texting and on Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and everything else, because of the safety. And, some of the areas that they're working in is proprietary sites. So we are addressing that. We are talking about showing up on time. And we've addressed this, again, pretty bluntly with individuals who are saying, well, I'm only going to work, I don't want to work on Fridays. Well, work week's Monday through Friday, or you need to look at the career choices that you're making. So we are addressing that through the Choices program. We are addressing it through the Global Careers and Professions program, and through the ThyssenKrupp Apprenticeship Training program. The students do go through a lot of life skill training, and some of it is public speaking and how to communicate effectively. One of the things that I'm excited to see this weekend is the youth apprentices are the ambassadors to our tour of industries. And
that's great.
And it never fails that people come back and say, wow, these kids are very well prepared and well spoken, and they knew more about this than I did, with it. So because we tie in the public speaking and the presentations with it. Now, the drugs, that is something that we are addressing also through one program I did not share with you is I have organized and I'm running a career service center on site at the largest high school, and as of next month we are expanding that to 2 county schools with the goal of having a career service center in every high school in Vermilion County within the next year. So think about that for a second. When is a student introduced to careers, especially those who are going to go directly in the workforce? A career service center is at local community colleges. Or the student, when they graduate from high school, if they are aware of it, they're going to go to an employment agency. Why not establish a career service center within the high school to be that liaison between the student and the employer? So with the job board, one of the things they do, the students come to me, we do the mock interviews, we do the dressing for success, we do the resume writing, we do everything we can to prep them. And I always ask them very quickly, I have 2 questions. Can you pass a drug test? If they say no, we got an issue because the employer is not going to even look at you because they are going to do a drug test. So then I'm going to get them the social services support that they need. But if they say they can, yes, and they're work ready and everything, we get them prepared as much as possible because my name's going on it. And we put the rubber stamp on it, and then I introduce the student to the employer. So there's a lot of different avenues that we're taking. It's a tough nut to crack, but we're doing everything we can to address the workforce needs of the employer and that work readiness while preparing the students to the reality of the work world.
So are there various competencies that employers perhaps have identified in addition to those technical competencies that you're starting to map out? Are there employability competencies that you're starting to think like these are the key pieces that all employers are starting to look for?
Yes, yes. And there are different ones. For example, we have a thing here in Vermilion County where there are several employers that say if you drop out of school, they're not going to hire you. They're not going to even interview you, which is very interesting, including the McDonald's. And so some kids, when we're working with, says, oh, that's okay, I'm going to drop out, I'm going to go work at McDonald's. I said, not in Vermilion County. They will not hire you unless you have a GED or a high school diploma. They are also, as mentioned, they're looking at attendance records. We're looking at discipline within the schools. We're looking at did they take the dual credit? And it doesn't matter. We're showing that we're looking at is that student ready to make that commitment? And so if they're ready to make the commitment to the dual credit classes and they're in the EFE classes and CTE classes and so forth, those are the things that the students are looking for. For example, I have one company that says if a student is Project Lead the Way, they have the basic fundamentals, they're on my interview list. I don't care whatever else classes they're taking, I want to interview that student. So they are looking at them.
Okay, that's really helpful. I'm wondering, before I just keep peppering Kim with questions, I'd love to hear from other folks. Like, what are some, I mean, this is probably bringing up some thinking for all of you as you contemplate how you're developing business engagement strategies in your local areas. What are some things that are popping up as a result of this presentation? It can even just be a comment. It doesn't have to be a question.
Kim, I have a question. Do you, how many other grants and things do you look at regarding your program?
Very few. We have mostly the grant organizations will come to us and say, we have a grant, we wanted to bring it to your attention, we would like for you to apply for it. One, for example, that we just made an announcement this morning, AT&T had asked us to submit a grant because they wanted to support expanding the career service center in the rural school districts. And so they just presented us with a check for $10,000 to help us pay the resources to bring on that individual. And that individual actually is an executive on loan from one of our major manufacturers here in town. and she's being loaned to us 2 days a week to help establish this.
Huh. I'm furiously typing. What other thoughts or things are kind of cropping up as you think about Kim's presentation and just these broader questions around employer engagement? This is as a kind of a key employer engagement strategy.
This is Courtney Greiner. One of the things that is unique with our apprenticeship is that we are affiliated with UnityPoint, and we are the hospital and human resources departments are very engaged with us to try and have a program with the apprentice person's students to basically go through like employment readiness, conflict resolution, and we do different sessions with them so that they will be ready for employment once they finish their exam or coursework and their certification exams.
So the students actually go through, let's say, an employability training as opposed to kind of a skills, like these are the skills you have to have, now go off and get them. Like this is really a training that UnityPoint takes on.
They do that, and then they participate in something I have developed. It's every week, and it's called, we just call it college readiness, but it's also focused on career readiness. There's an excellent book that I have acquired, and it's basically all about being prepared. It's called Job Readiness for Health Professionals, and it's soft skill strategies for success. And what we're doing is going through all of that, and it talks about being positive, improving, like taking exams, like schoolwork, but then it also goes into setting, time management and what do you do, like how do you set up a job search, how do you do a resume, how interviewing skills. So it's all different types of things that we go through with them that prepare them for the workplace. So what do you do if you have a bad day? Strategies for that. And are you having conflict with people or being easy to deal with? So are you having conflict with people? How do you instill trust? How do you listen, actively listen, and then show ways that you are able to resolve any type of conflict? And then just punctuality and time management, like being on time, being professional, looking professional, all of those things I have incorporated into this kind of college readiness, but it's really not for college. It's more like life, being ready for, the job career.
Sure,
So,
sure. And how long is your,
our apprenticeship is going to be 18 months, so they will be doing all of this during an 18-month program. They also we have affiliation with CareerLink that also has, that's more of like if they need like help, like just any type of...
That's your local workforce investment.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
So, but I'd really like to develop something like this for all of our students, but most definitely the apprenticeship students need it, just because a lot of them have never had to be... some of them are single mothers, but they don't have accountability. So they're, they just don't show up to something, or they don't really think that they need to contact someone, or they call me and say, hey, can you let so-and-so know I'm going to be late? And I'm like, no, it's not my responsibility. You need to call them yourself. So it's just one of those things. And I think it's just they've been sort of, I hate to say it, but they've been coddled and they've had their hand held, and they are so used to not having to take accountability for things. So it's a little bit of a culture shock when they get here that they need to realize, but they're going to have someone's life in their hands. This is healthcare, and it's something that, we're doing CPR tonight, and I've been already thinking about, okay, what am I going to say to them? And I've thought of, pretend that this is your child. Would you think about this when you're in a life or death situation, and would you want this person to be doing CPR knowing that they screwed around in class and didn't really care about it, or didn't do the modules that they were supposed to beforehand because they blew it off? Is that the person you want to save your daughter or your mom or your dad or your husband or whomever? And, I think it's just relating back to, a life event of their own and having them take things seriously. So.
Sure.
This is Kim. We address some of that in our Global Careers and Professions class. And as I mentioned, sometimes you just have to be very direct and kind of in their face with a couple of those things. When we have students who come in and say, well, I want to be a nurse, and I will say, okay, let's look at your grades. And if they, in their bio and anatomy classes, if they got D's and F's, we've got a problem. And I'll say, sorry, I want an AB nurse working on me that knows the difference between a liver and a lung. I do not want a DF student working on me. And when you start talking to the students through these programs that we have, many of the times they're picking their career field based off what the latest TV show is, what their friends are involved in, and not based on what their skill sets are on or what they're capable of doing. So through our career cruising program, we have the students do career assessments. We have them do personalities and values assessments. So we make sure all three of those are lining up with it. And in the Global Careers and Professions class, that internship is 50% of their grade. And should they be fired from their internship for not following through on some of those things that you just mentioned, of not calling because they're going to be late or because they didn't show up, or they needed to reschedule, or they used their cell phone, or they weren't engaged and so forth, the employer can and has fired them. Well, then this reality hits the student because that's 50% of their grade. I've had some students, for example, ask their mentor to be friends with them on Facebook. And that employer also offered that student a part-time job. But she didn't want to come in and work, and the employer said, this is your responsibility. So she started saying some negative things about that company. Of course, the supervisor seeing it, the supervisor then comes back and say, your services is no longer available. So the girl calls me, and a student calls me, and she says, was I fired? Yes, with it. And she says, well, can you fix this? And I said, no, I can't. This is your error, your mistake. And you're right. A lot of students have been coddled for many, many years, and they need to know that this is their responsibility. Mom and dad and the coaches and the teachers aren't going to be there to hold their hands. When you get into college, they don't care if you're late for class. They've got their money. They're going to train you whether they're going to go on whether you're there in class or not. And I think that message needs to be very strong and shared with students very directly so that they know what they're walking into. And are they ready for it?
Yeah, and I think what's really crucial is that it not turn into some kind of, to a certain extent, a blame game, but more like this is what employers are asking for. This is as a future employee. These are things that are getting expected of you.
Yes.
And then also for employers to recognize areas where students may need additional support and make sure that they're working with the right people. And that's where the partnerships become really, really crucial.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that this discussion around business engagement and how you get employers to the table and how you keep them at the table, I feel like we've got a tremendous amount of information about how you keep them at the table. When you think about how you get them at the table, and I know, Kim, this is like 20 years ago, I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit of an understanding of how this started. I know you started with forklift training, but was there an initial data assessment? Was this a small outreach? Was this just kind of something that came together as a result of employers saying, hey, we're not getting what we need? What was the kind of seed that planted some of this?
It was the local calls that our economic development director was making with companies, and it became a recognized gap with them that at that particular time they could not fill the forklift driving positions. There wasn't forklift driving training. They wanted a certain skill sets, and they could not fill those jobs. And so it started out, okay, what can we do to address this particular issue. So Vermilion Advantage took the information from the employers and met with the community college. And from that, a forklift driving certificate program was developed. It turned into a contest of sorts, like a forklift rodeo event, and then into a hiring event. And so the employers who came together, the first original 12, their needs were met. They started filling the forklift driving positions, and they came together and said, we are band-aiding the situation. We need to dive deeper into this. And that's when I said we went from forklift driving to third grade. They said, because we need to start planting the seed. And we looked at this and we said, what is the return on the investment going to be? And we had no idea. How do you measure something that starts in third grade? And last year, in order to keep them at the table and so forth, we partnered with the ICCB, Illinois Community College Board, Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, Department of Employment Securities, State Board of Education, and it took us quite a long time to get a confidentiality agreement in place because we do not have a strong longitudinal data system here in the state of Illinois. And we provided those in manufacturing and our healthcare clusters. From that, we said we want to look at machinists and we want to look at RNs. When did we plant the seed, and are they still here, based on the time and the effort and the money that's been invested so far? What we discovered was two things. One, manufacturing we could not do because a machinist can be called 40 different titles. It's too broad to narrow it down. An RN was different. We were able to go back to 2012 and track individuals by what they were earning 2 years prior to graduating from a nursing program to 2 years after. We were able to track that they started out and earned their CNA through our EFE system, College Express, and we were able to then look at if they started at the CNA, can I track that back to 8th grade to the career lab, and did they choose the health care? That part we had to look at in a broader approach, but otherwise what we were able to do is then track them up through their RN, and are they employed in Vermilion County? We discovered that those who went through this particular route, over 50% of them still work in Vermilion County. We were also able to identify, because one of the catches in all this is the employees are identified by where their payroll comes from. And Carl, which has their payroll in Champaign, but they have satellites in Vermilion County, they had to look at that they were in Champaign County. But we know otherwise that they were here in Vermilion County. We also know that many of them had a substantial increase in their salaries. Because we're so aware of what's going on in our community, we knew there was a big chunk missing too, and we looked at it right away, where the state, who was running our longitudinal data for us, discovered that the Ileana Veterans Administration is housed here in Vermilion County. It is tagged as a government entity, not a healthcare entity.
Oh, okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, so then we were able to say, wait a minute, we've got them like you because of the way the structure is set up, you being the state had it labeled in a government entity. They're a healthcare provider. So we were able to go back and pull that information as well, because that's a large employer for our county. So in the end, we were able to go back and present to our clusters the return on the investment, and it was worth every penny that they put in.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful.
And that's what keeps them at the table.
So I think that answers a really important question, and I think this is something that I personally would love to dig into, and just recognizing it's 12:15, and I want to spend a little bit of time before we all sign off talking about kind of what's coming next. I would like to spend some time digging into, in our next session, that building of a career pathways backbone and how you leverage small wins in order to get and keep employers and other partners, not just employers, but other partners at the table, so that you can build on that momentum. So that's something I think will be really crucial as we go forward. So just recognizing that it's 12:17, I want to open the floor to find out if there are any outstanding questions for Kim, but also to find out if there are, I would love to hear from you folks to share what are some things that you're struggling with that you would like more information on, that this kind of format could help provide to you.
Kim, can you go back to that, and I know we talked a little bit about it, that drug testing, and we're dealing with basically high school students, and it sounds like a lot of your youth group is also in that area.
Yes.
How do you address that with a high school student?
Well, through presentations, through our member clusters, where they just come out and say, we will not hire you if you cannot pass a drug test. Don't waste our time. Don't enter our programs. And in some of our programs, it is a requirement that the student is drug tested prior to being accepted into the program, such as the apprenticeship training programs. It's got to be a blunt conversation. And what amazes the superintendents, the board members, even the businesses, having a neutral party, which being me as the convener in the school districts, I make it very clear to the student. I say, I'm not your guidance counselor, your principal, your teacher. I'm not your coach. I'm not your parent. So what I say to you and what you say to me remains between the two of us. And they said, all right. And I said, can you pass a drug test? And the first thing, 1 out of 4 says no. We got a problem, And then they'll say, do you want to know what I'm on? Sure. And they'll spill their guts. And from a youth perspective, they go, but I can quit tomorrow. And I'm like, are you sure about that? You can't, with it. And then I have to relay to them. I said, okay, you're spending X amount of dollars on your drug habit, and you're willing to forfeit a career making this, and this because you need to get high on this. Last week I had a student come to me and said, I'm coming to you because I do not want to follow in my mother's footsteps. She's made a lot of bad choices. She's been in and out of jail. She's a drug user, and she's a drug seller. And he goes, I don't want that kind of life. I'm like, okay.
Oh, wow. That's rough.
Yeah, and I said, what is it that you want to do? He says, I want to be a machinist. I said, all right. He goes, and I'm graduating early. Okay. We talked about the resume, go through the whole thing, and then it comes down to the question, can you pass a drug test? And he said, no. Listen to remember what I just asked him?
Yeah.
And I said, so you don't want to follow in your mother's footsteps, but you're a user. Yes. It's in my home environment. Then what do you do? Then you meet with the student confidentially, and you get the social worker involved, and you get him whatever he needs. And those social services come and wrap around it. I cannot be a fix-all. That's outside my scope. But what I can do is provide them in the right area. And then what I do is I come back and said, you get your act together and you come back and see me. And I hold his hand through that process basically and say, I promise you this Career Service Center is not going away. Even if you graduate in December, get your act together, you come back, and I promise you I will guide you through this process, and we will get you to where you want to go. But the ball is in your court.
I think that's, it's very tough. It's a tough conversation. And I think that, Kim, to me it sounds like there's like 3 of you running around. I don't know how you're getting everything done one day. But I think that, I'm not sure if that was Michael who asked that question. I'm going to put my parent hat on here for a second. I have a 15-year-old. And I think that Kim's point earlier was very apt. If you get employers and adults to speak very clearly and very plainly about what expectations are, kids in many cases rise to the occasion. It's when there's absence of clarity that it creates a tremendous amount of confusion for them. And I think if employers are willing to come out and say that these are priorities for us and that drug testing is a crucial priority and that they're willing to invest in programs that help mitigate that for students, that help address that for students, that often can go a tremendous way to addressing that problem. But I think that is an endemic problem and one that that most employers, particularly in the manufacturing space and the healthcare space, do deal with. So some of it is about creating plain language around that and being very clear about expectations and requirements. So what other questions or things that you think this type of a format could help us address? I think Kim was incredibly helpful, and I think that she sparked all sorts of great conversations, and we could probably spend the next year talking about a lot of this work, and I think a lot of what we're going to talk about over the next 9 to 10 months is going to come out of this presentation in some way, shape, or form. So I'm curious if anyone wants, the floor is open if anyone wants to indicate if there are particular things that you feel like this is something we're struggling with and we would love some more information on this. Okay, so I'm gonna just, I think that folks, these phone conversations are often really tough. Let's say everyone has the emails. There's a small enough group of us that we can use email to have some communication back and forth, unless we feel like there's a need for having more of a formalized communication structure. But I would love some feedback from folks to find out, what was super helpful about this and where you think you could really use some information to help pinpoint areas that your organization, your program, and your community are really struggling with. So having said all of that, I think that I can give you folks 7 minutes back to your day. It's very exciting. I would love to give you a little time back, a little gift for all of you. And I want to truly thank Kim again for giving such a great presentation and for talking about all of the hard and really nuanced work that Vermilion Advantage is engaging in, and I appreciate, as always, your time and sharing it with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks to everybody, and I will